Have you ever been in a 12th century castle where important decisions were made for the future of a country? Let me tell you the story of Alcázar of Segovia. Welcome to the Alcázar de Segovia, the palace fortress of the kings of Castile, a place where stone, power of legend, have been intertwined for almost 1,000 years. From the outside it looks like a fairy tale castle, but inside it has witnesses royal weddings, succession crises, the rise of the Catholic monarchs, and the birth of one of Europe's first great artillery academies. At the end of the 15th century, this Alcázar was one of the key strongholds of Queen Isabella I and King Ferdinand II, the Reyes Catolicos. Here Isabel took refuge in 1474, in the middle of a succession crisis, and from here she stepped out to be proclaimed Queen of Castile in nearby Plaza Mayor, laying the political foundation of the reign that could sponsor Columbus and the expansion across the Atlantic. As we walk through the chapels, throne rooms, armories and towers, we are not only visiting a beautiful monument, we are walking the same corridors where crucial decisions were prepared, alliances were sealed, and the future of the kingdom was negotiated. We begin our visit in the lowest level of the Alcázar, the basement, where you really feel that this palace is, first and foremost, a fortress anchored in living rock. Down here, close to the cliff and the moat, you are at the most defensive heart of the castle, the part that has supported all the royal rooms and towers for centuries. Starting in the basement is like starting at the first chapter of a long story. From these solid foundations, the Alcázar grew upwards into royal halls, artillery classrooms, and finally the iconic skyline we see today. We arrive at the Hall of Kings, where statues of the kings of Austria, Leon, and Castile lines the wall like a silent royal council. Here you can visually follow the evolution of the medieval Iberian kingdoms into the powerful crowns of Castile that will later unite with Aragon under Isabel and Ferdinand. This is the perfect place to talk about the Catholic monarchs. It was from this very Alcázar that Isabel sheltered during the succession crisis after the death of Henry IV. Protected by the fortress and by its governor Andrés de Cabrera, she secured the support of Segovia, then left the castle to be proclaimed queen in the city square, an essential step of the path that could lead, years later, to the sponsorship of Columbus and the beginning of the Spanish overseas empire. Surrounded by these stone kings, you feel how the Alcázar is both a symbol and a tool of power, a building that helped legitimize Isabel's rule at a crucial moment in history. The coats of arms and decorative program here echo the message of legitimacy and continuity which the Catholic monarchs were so keen to protect. Fireplace room, furnished with 16th century pieces of portraits of Philip II and Philip III, with tapestries that warm the walls as much as the Great Heart warmed the air. This was a room for gatherings, meals and negotiations, where ambassadors and nobles discussed borders, marriage and wars under the glow of the firelight. On one of the walks here, you can see a view of the Alcázar before the fire of 1862 changed its roofline and before Segovia's cathedral was moved to its current site after the revolt of the Comuneros. It is like a time capsule. The decoration tells you not only how powerful lived, but also how this building itself has evolved over the centuries. The throne room, one of the earliest and most emblematic halls of the palace, where the royal throne is preserved beneath its canopy. In rooms like this, kings and queens of Castile received ambassadors, heard petitions and made decisions that could shift the balance of powers across Europe. The rich Mudéjar inspiration in the decoration reminds us that Christian Castile absorbed and transformed Islamic artistic tradition rather than erasing them. Here the very ceiling becomes a message. Under this geometric, ordered sky, the monarch appears as the guardian of harmony in a kingdom forged for diverse cultures. We continue to the gallery room, originally created of Queen Catherine of Lancaster, while her son, the future John II, was still a child. Its ceilings once resembled the hull of a ship, which earned in the nickname Sala de la Galera, as if the whole room were an inverted basalt ceiling silently above visitors. Although the fire of 1862 damaged much of the original woodwork, the restored Mudéjar covered ceiling still astonished with its intricate patterns. This was a reception room, a stage for ceremony and diplomacy, where the visual splendor of the ceiling prepared visitors to meet the power that sat beneath it. One of the most striking spaces in the pine cone room, crowned by an extraordinary ceiling decorated with 392 carved pine cones. Completed in the 15th century, this vital, almost surreal canopy transformed a simple geometric vault into a forest of symbolic forms. Pine cones, associated with fertility and eternity, were an ideal motif for a dynasty eager to proclaim its strength and continuity. If you are tempted to count all 392, you are not alone. Many visitors start enthusiastically and give up halfway, dizzy from looking up. We begin our visit in the chapel, a space where faith and politics met under the same vaulted roof. On 14 November 1570, this chapel hosted the wedding of Philip II and Anna of Austria, a dynasty union that reinforced the Habsburg network of power in Europe. But this is also the type of intimate, protected space that earlier monarchs, including Isabella Ferdinand, could have used for private masses, halls, and confidential meetings. Imagine Isabel here in the tense winter of 1474 to 1475, praying for support while factions of the nobility choose whether to back her claim to the throne. The Sala de Armas, the Armory. This is where the most practical battle ready side of the fortress is built. Armor, swords, cannons, and early firearms line up in the impressive display. It is easy to picture soldiers rushing into this space in times of alarm, grabbing weapons before taking position on the wall and towers above Segovia. Suits of armor, shields, pikes, and early cannons remind us that this was not just a residence, but a fortress guarding both the royal family and the crown's more advanced weapons. Walking among these pieces, you can imagine the days when the sound of armor echoed in these corridors, and when decisions taken in the throne room were enforced by the steel and gunpowder stored here. The Alcázar's elegance and its military might are two sides of the same coin. Ceremony upstairs, weapons downstairs. In the 18th century, the Alcázar entered a new chapter. From royal palace and medieval fortress, it becomes the cradle of modern artillery science in Spain. In 1764, King Charles III founded the Royal Artillery School here, transforming all halls into classrooms, laboratories, and lecture rooms. The officers who studied here were not only warriors, they were mathematicians and engineers, calculating trajectories, studying ballistics, and designing fortifications. In these same spaces, where medieval kings celebrated banquets, 18th century cadets solved equations and drew geometric diagrams for more precise and devastating cannon fire. The fire of 1862 was a turning point. Flame destroyed the roofs of many archives and libraries associated with the artillery school. The academy was forced to move, but the memory of those decades remained embedded in the building, which had become a symbol of the professionalization and modernization of the Spanish army. Today, the Royal Artillery School Museum displays models, instruments, uniforms, and documents that narrate that scientific transformation. You can follow how the discipline of artillery evolved from the rule of thumb practice to exact science, with the Alcázar itself serving as both laboratory and symbol. Above these museum rooms, on the upper floors, in the General Military Archive of Segovia, the oldest history archive of the Spanish armed forces. Here are preserved thousands of documents, plans of fortresses, campaign reports, orders, payrolls, and correspondence that trace centuries of military history. The paradox is striking. A medieval fairy tale castle that now guards not only armors and cannons, but also the fragile paper memory of an entire army. In that sense, the Alcázar protects two cities at once: the visible city of Segovia, spread out below, and the invisible city of documents and stories stored in its archive. No tour of the Alcázar is complete without the Tower of John II, the great tower that dominates the silhouette of the castle and the skyline of Segovia. Built in the 15th century, in the reign of John II of Castile, it rises like a stone lighthouse above the rocky spur that falls steeply into the Eresma Valley. Visitors who accept the challenge can climb at its 152 narrow spiral steps, a true medieval staircase coiled inside the tower, thick walls. The climb is demanding, but each turn of the staircase brings you closer to one of the most spectacular viewpoints in Castile. From the terrace at the top you get a 360-degree panorama. The sea of red roofs, the soaring Gothic tower of Segovia's cathedral, the aqueduct in the distance, and beyond, the Sierra de Guadarrama. It is from here that the Alcázar most clearly resembles the prow of a ship, projecting out over the cliffs as it is ready to sail off into the Castilian sky. Access to this tower often requires a separate or upgraded ticket, but the reward is not only the view, it is also the feeling that you are standing where the royal guards once watched the horizon for enemies and messengers. With the wind blowing across the battlements, it is easy to understand why this castle has inspired painters, travelers, and even modern fantasy creators who see it as an archetype of the perfect medieval fortress. The Alcázar de Segovia has been many things: frontier fortress, beloved royal residence, refugee in a time of crisis, state prison, artillery academy, military archive, and today museum and symbol of Spanish heritage. In the late 15th century, it gave shelter and legitimacy to Isabella of Castile, helping her to secure her crown and thus paving the way of the union with Ferdinand. The completion of the Reconquista and the opening of the Atlantic world. Here, the medieval and the modern, the ceremonial and the scientific, the local and the global, all meet in a single building, dominating the city of Segovia. When you visit this Alcázar, you are not just admiring a beautiful profile on a hill, you are entering the backstage of Spanish history. from the age of castles to the age of cannons and beyond. And as you leave, perhaps after one last look from the tower of John II, the castle reminds you that the great decisions of the past were made in very real rooms, by very real rulers, by their echoes can still be felt centuries later. Here, where Isabel claimed her crown and cannons once taught the science of war, the Alcázar de Segovia shows us that history is not a distant story, but a living presence in every stone, every bolt, and every view over the city.